Today I'm going to be covering how to make high dynamic range images using Maya, Nuke and Photoshop. HDRIs are images used to give 3D scenes real-world lighting. A high dynamic range image is a 32-bit image. It contains much more colour information and variation than an 8 or 16-bit image, because this stores floating point values. This means you can select between numbers, not just RGB 255, but RGB 255.137. This allows you to make very small, very fine adjustments, and lends itself to very realistic lighting with regards to 3D applications. The dynamic range refers to the range of contrast found within the image, so values that lie between absolute light and absolute darkness. A low dynamic range image is an image like an 8-bit. These are found on monitors, online, and on printed paper. They're usually referred to as low dynamic range due to the fact that they can't display images in any other way. Low dynamic range have 3 channels, red, green and blue, or RGB, each ranging from between 0 to 255 in value. HDRIs tend to be created from a series of photographs, and they're not just a simple camera setting. Camera data and exposure levels are modified in several images and then combined in Photoshop to create an HDRI. Photos are taken at progressively brighter increments to ensure the widest range of light, and then combined into one image for 3D lighting. These incrementally brighter images must be taken manually from a camera and not tweaked digitally from another file. To set up correct camera settings, start with a stable surface or a tripod, for ideally the images should line up perfectly. Depending on your camera settings, make sure that the aperture is locked to a particular state. Make sure the f-stop is locked to one particular state as well. The only thing you want to change is the shutter speed, and these will be increased or decreased incrementally to give you the required trace of brightness. On some cameras this can be automated, and these are called bracketed exposures. The format ideally is RAW files, however these can be extremely large files. If your camera doesn't allow it, most camera JPEGs, while less ideal, they can be slightly more practical. Where possible though, use RAW files. Consider the environment as well. Quiet empty spaces are better, as moving cars and people, which appear in some but not all the images, can affect the success of your final one. You want as much control over your environment as possible. Ideally, you want 5 to 7 images at one exposure value difference. Less than 3 images is not recommended, as it won't give you the best range of light values. I will mainly be focusing on using a mirrored ball. Mirrored balls can be bought in photography shops, however, garden gazing globes work well too. Try Amazon for a bargain. Just remember that due to it being a mirrored ball, you and your tripod will feature in it, and you will have to paint yourself out at a later date. And if your ball is not 100% perfect, you will pick up smudges and scratches. This can be painted over for later on, and the advantage is that you get a virtually 180-degree view of your environment, and you can do it on a very small budget in your own time. When using a mirrored ball, you can either take one set of images straight, or a series of images taken from around the ball to give a full 360-degree panorama. This can be used using a tape measure and setting up your tripod at various stages around the globe. Measuring a set distance each point from the mirrored ball, then marking these points on the floor is very good practice. Fisheyes. Using a fisheye lens, you can get an effect similar to the mirrored ball. You get a wide range due to the natural distortion of the fisheye lens. The advantages are that you don't feature as a reflection in the scene, and there are no imperfections or scratches that appear on reflective surfaces. It is also easier to unwrap the images and turn them into useful HDRIs. However, the area you're able to capture is not as wide as the ball, so you will have to take more images, which means more work processing and stitching the photographs together later on. Also, decent fisheye lenses are much more expensive than the mirrored ball and can reach extortionate prices. Creating a multi-exposure single HDRI in Photoshop. In Photoshop, go up to the File menu, hit Automate, and select Merge to HDR. Navigate to your images and select all of the ones related to the same camera shot, i.e. all the ones taken at the same position around your mirrored ball. This can take a while to merge, so do be patient. A dialog box pops up with a preview of all the images to be combined. The reason or aim of doing this is so that all the information for the whole ranges of levels in each photo will be contained and accessible in one single file. These levels are the whole dynamic range for the scene. Photoshop will save you time by calculating how the images line up to make it as smooth as possible. Select OK and it will finalise the image. You will be left with a true 32-bit HDRI. It doesn't look that great. Sometimes they can look dark or really blown out, because all you are viewing is a small data of the values contained in the screen. This is due to the 8-bit RGB values of the screen itself, which means you're not seeing the colour spectrum or all the data combined in the 32-bit image. You can adjust the white point settings if you wish. If taking shots at multiple points around a mirrored ball, then you can save the response curve, which allows you to then load up the same curve for each batch of photos, thus keeping the settings and values consistent across each location. On saving the image, you will be given some choices as to what to save as. It is good practice to save as an open EXR. However, some programs do have issues size-wise trying to handle it, so it's a good idea to save a radiance file as well. Radiance files are an older file format and not as useful as an open EXR. However, many programs and older computers can handle them more efficiently. With your HDRI open, make sure that the Rulers tab is selected and drag down guides to frame your ball in a square. Create a selection around this and hit crop. Repeat this whole process for all sets of images which were taken around your mirrored ball, and you will end up with a series of images similar to this. The next step is to take the mirrored ball and unwrap it. For this, there are several ways of doing this, however, I'm going to unwrap it in Nuke. Bring in the positional HDRI files by creating the read node. Add a spherical transform node, which will automatically unwrap the mirrored ball. The output to this is set to latitude longitude. However, the size may need to be adjusted to use as a lat long map, because a lat long map needs to be twice as long as it is high. To modify, go into the spherical transform controls, select output format, create a new format and change the file settings to 2048 by 1024. This is twice as long as it is high. Although effective at unwrapping a mirrored ball, this will result in distortion at the edges of the picture, and there's still the presence of yourself or the cameraman who took the image present. Ideally, this should be removed. This is why you have to take some from different positions. On every single position that you took a set of photos, apply the spherical transform and then render out using a 32-bit OpenEXR or Radiance HDRI format. Make sure it's set to 32-bit and try and keep the colour space as linear. This is the point where you can stitch together your images in Nuke. However though, now we're going to open them up in Photoshop. So, creating the HDR panorama in Photoshop. If stitching the images together in Nuke is too complicated, you can simply use Nuke to unwrap in the lat long format and then render out and then take it to Photoshop. On opening an image in Photoshop, ensure that the new canvas you will be working on is wider than it is at present. Here I am stitching together the south and north images. Remember that the image may look flipped as you are photographing a mirrored reflecting sphere. Instead of importing the whole image of, say, the east and west into the original file as well, select the areas you will require and copy and paste it in. Align the new layer with the original as best as you can, then use the transform tool to adjust the image as it fits. It may not line up perfectly, however this can be modified with time and patience. On the new layer, add a layer mask. To do this, click the little button with a circle in it, as shown here. Ensure that you have selected the layer mask and not the layer itself, and then by using the black pen, you can actually erase some of the images without affecting the original because it's only on the mask. This means you can edit the mask without distorting the original image, which is very, very useful. If you feel you have made a mistake, simply switch over to the white brush and you can paint it back in. All the pixel data is still there. I'd recommend using a brush with a soft edge to erase any sharp, obvious edges. Switch between the brush presets and play around until the image looks correct. So here I have the north and south ones and I've basically stitched them together. I have east and west open on a different file, and what I am doing, instead of copying the whole image in, I'm just taking the specific portions that I need, pasting them in, and then by using a layer mask, painting and erasing until they blend in with the scene. This takes a bit of time, and you may have to adjust the layers and then use some extra painting and merging and clone stamp tool on top. Here is a quick version of the final thing. If you're finding it difficult to change the opacity between layers to ensure they line up, but remember to change it back when saving the final one. The trick is to erase as many straight lines or angles as possible, as they're ones which cause the most issues. This is often tricky, as you can see in this image, due to overlap and parallax that are inevitable. But just find a sensible matching point. The bottom of the image tends to be less important than the top. Once done, use the clone tool in the combined layer to tidy up any remaining anomalies such as the tripod markers or strange shadows. You may still find there is a lot of overlays from the left and right side. To solve this, select the usable area and crop down the image to get as near to a perfect 360 degrees as possible. A good trick to test this is by going up to the Filter tab and applying an offset. Here you can then blend the edges together to ensure that they line up perfectly. This is also a technique which is used in tiling textures for games, and is a very handy one to know. Once combined, you can use the image as is, or make some adjustments prior to using it in a 3D environment. Photoshop allows you to create adjustment layers on top of the 30-bit 2 images. The adjustment layer is the black-white symbol at the bottom of the window. The benefit of using an adjustment layer is that it can be altered at a later date without causing any issues. Using the exposure layer, you can see the effectiveness of your HDRI by seeing all of the exposure levels contained in the picture. Feel free to adjust the exposure to suit your needs. In the next tutorial, I'll be covering how to use and apply the HDRI in Maya to provide your scenes with real-world lighting.